Welcome, welcome everybody. Welcome to our Tuesday evening presentation on the transformative role of VXRLabs, or mostly learning about virtual reality, learning about science through the magic of virtual reality in one of the most impressive high schools in the United States, and because of what they do globally. I'm Steve Grubbs, CEO and founder of VictoryXR. I had the good fortune of hearing Felicia Chen make a presentation at South by Southwest EDU. And because of that, I said we have to get her in our spring webinar series. And then Elizabeth Hutton said, oh, you also need to fold Stephanie Castle in there. So Felicia and Stephanie both are teachers at Dwight Global Online, and I'll let them tell you a little bit more about Dwight Global, but it is really a groundbreaking online school, and they chose to bring in virtual reality, which is the intersection of remote learning and hands-on learning. And I understand that Stephanie is the one who is implementing it the most in class, and Felicia has this great overview of the whole program and results and that type of thing. So I'm going to stop talking because people don't want to hear me anyway. And Felicia, I'm going to turn the mic as it is over to you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having us here today. We are really excited to share how the tool, how VXRLab has transformed the way we teach science, and how it's going to look like for the future. So just a little bit of background. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are right now. My name is Felicia Chen. I'm the IB teacher. I teach biology, chemistry. I'm also the science lead at Dwight Global Online. And we also have Stephanie Castle here with us. Stephanie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, thank you for having us here. My name is Stephanie Castle. I teach IB biology at Dwight Global. This is my first year with the school, but it's been a really exciting year. I'm really excited to share with you what we're doing with the VXRLabs in science.
Thank you, Stephanie. So a little bit of background about Dwight Global. We are a private online school since 2014. And we offer grades 6 throughout 12. Currently, we have around 400 plus students, and we are ranked as the second best private online school in America. We are also one of the leading schools to be selected to pilot the whole IB, the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program online. This is a 2 years rigorous high school course. And, I teach bio and chem, and every time I introduce myself to everybody about me being a fully remote teacher teaching high school, one of the first questions that we get, I'm pretty sure Stephanie would agree as well, is that how do you do labs online? So here we are, and we are going to share how VXRLabs and VictoryXR transform and really change the way we teach. So what we will be covering today is the transformative role of VR and VXR labs, what we have learned from the classroom, and what the trajectory would look like for the future. All right, so for the past 2 years, we have been partnering with VictoryXR to build or to write high school science practicals. So our role is the subject matter expert, and what we do is to really sit down and envision what we want the labs to look like, what user experience makes the most sense, and what environment is best for learning. So this started with Liz Hutton. She partnered with Steve Grubbs, and we have the chance and the honor to really pass on the baton and to expand it more in our school as well. And with all those goals in mind, what we have written down, we work with the software engineers here at VictoryXR. And today we have roughly around 15 biology and chemistry labs available. So these are everything that has been written, and there's even more in the pipeline. So more to come. Now, so from the user's point of view, what the students experience is that they select a specific practical, they get transported into this space where all the materials, all the apparatus are available on a bench and it is set up. Any instructions as well. So here, for example, I have a chromatography lab. This is a pretty classic high school biology lab that students do. And this is what the results should look like. So in a lab, when they get transported in, again, this is an example of a lab, whatever that they need is set up on there. They have the instructions there, they have any reference materials that they need there. And the students, they can complete all these labs individually or together in a synchronous, in a live sessions as well. I can create a room, I can transport or bring in all of my kids at the same time, and they can take turn, doing the experiments while other people or other students are like just being surrounded by the at the bench, and then they are discussing the lab together. So this is how the chromatography lab actually looks like. So students, they are not limited to conduct a lab in a specific, say, set hours of time. They can do this with more freedom, without the restriction of, say, availability of technicians, of resources as well. And you can see very clearly in this whole process, the students are the one reading the instructions, carrying out the labs, collecting data. And these are the skills that is similar to what is being fostered in a brick and mortar lab as well. And one good thing is that if you can see here, these are the data that is populated in the labs. These are actually data from actual brick and mortar lab studies. And we can even program in variability depending on the different actions. So every time when students are repeating experiments, they get a different set of data, which they can then use to perform data analysis and processing. Stephanie, would you like to talk a little bit about the labs as well, what you have seen in your classroom?
Sure. So all of the kids, as Felicia was saying, can come into the space all at one time. And I think we're going to talk about how that's progress and what the learning curve is like later, I think. But one specific lab that my students came into, I think, Felicia, you have it up on the slide, is the lab, which we call metabolic reactions lab. So that one in particular is a lab, I think it's the next slide, there we go, where the students are supposed to provide the person whom in the lab is called Tommy with a different sequence of food, and to see then how many bicycles Tommy can do. And the interesting thing about being able to do this is a couple of things. First of all is that we can set the students tasks with regards to identification of variables. So as science teachers, we're trying to encourage them to identify just one variable that they're going to change, their independent variable, and one that they will measure their dependent variable. But in this lab, they really have a wide range of choice. So when you set them this task, you can see as a result of their submissions afterwards, because they can do it whenever they want to do it on their own time, in their own VR headsets, whether they've actually understood by way of the kinds of data that they collected. So that's the first thing, that they get a freedom of choice by doing these labs and doing them on their own time schedule. And second of all, in particular with regards to this lab, since this one involves feeding a person, this is actually, I would say, even one up from what you could do in a brick and mortar, because this is not a lab that ethically that you would do in a brick and mortar situation, but it is one that students are incredibly curious about. So you're cultivating their curiosity and facilitating this kind of experimentation, but in a very ethical and safe manner. And so that's really provided opportunity for our students in the virtual environment. I'll pass it back to you, Felicia.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. And I would share just a short clip about what the classroom discussion actually looked like. So when we were doing this lab, and I hope
it would be fish, avocado, and ham. Fish, avocado, and meat.
We need to put the avocado first, because the order has to stay the same.
So to redo it, this trial. So then it would be avocado, fish, and then the ham?
It should be avocado, ham, and then fish.
So in this short clip itself, the teachers spoke nothing. The students took over the class. And in fact, one of the students is actually one of the most quiet students at the beginning of the class. So you're getting a lot of interaction. You're seeing their thinking in real time. So it's very exciting, even from the teacher's perspective, to see how the labs have really changed the classroom and the Zoom sessions as well.
And I can add on to that, if I may, that particular clip, that was a clip out of one of my lessons with the lab that I just described. And the students had actually been put into breakout rooms in that session. So while we have opportunity to do it offline and independently on their own time in our live lessons, we also have opportunities in breakout rooms. And to speak to Felicia's point there, you have then you've really created in the virtual environment that opportunity for discussion. And in science, as I was mentioning, we're discussing the idea of different variables and the order of those variables, that you could hear students engaging in that. And yes, one of them is one of the quietest of the class.
Yes, it's always interesting. And you can really see their critical thinking, those, higher order skills, the skills that they need for college readiness. Those are the skills that are really being fostered as well during this time. Yeah, and the labs, just adding on a little bit, it's not just program labs. We also have more open-ended lab. For example, here this is a lab where students have to make the different choice when it comes to studying plants. They can choose whether they want to look at different factors like wind or light, how it affects plant. And then based on those choices, they will then have to assemble the apparatus accordingly. So and they are making all these decisions, and it's not as straightforward as a prescribed lab, and students are making different choices too. We also have dissection labs where they are looking at different anatomy here. And we quickly also learned that VXRLabs and what VR can do is way beyond just science practicals itself. Students can use it for immersive learning experience. Like on the right-hand side, I have my evolution class. Students are actually on board the HMS Beagle. They get to hang out with Darwin while learning about evolution. And now with generative AI, we can even start thinking about, say, students, they can conduct interviews with authors, with scientists, with different historical figures. A lot of discovery phenomenon-based learning can happen during this time.
And if I can also continue to add on there, the fascinating things about some of the equipment we saw, the transpiration lab options there and dissections. And while, of course, virtual reality, they use the headset to access it, we're really giving them opportunities to use pieces of equipment from home that they might not otherwise have at home. So you're really providing them with that environment where they can engage in all of this, whereas in their actual home space, or in some schools all around the world that might not have certain advanced pieces of equipment, they are available in virtual reality.
Yeah, exactly. So we do agree, these are skills and these are tools that not only are applicable to a fully remote environment, it can benefit everybody in, across all different modes of learning. Say, if a student miss school or because of traveling, they're not able to access labs, they are not missing out on the opportunities to learn about science and the practical skills as well. And if a student is somebody that needs or that would benefit from more practice, these are labs that they can do it in their own pace, in their own time. They can practice it however many times that they want to really understand what it's like. So it's, that's what we're seeing so far. And one thing that is really cool that we are really bringing it into the classroom is how immersive this can be. So for example, if you're learning about anatomy, this is a heart. I can make this life size. You can see I can change its size. I can rotate, pick it up, rotate it around, look at it from different point of view, different angles. So students get a full picture about, oh, this is how art actually look like. And if that's not enough, I can even do a walk-in tour to see, oh, this is how vials actually look like, the different chambers. So we are taking away the mental load of imagining things when it comes to teaching students, so they can really focus on understanding and focus their energy on, really expanding their learning.
It'll be fish.
And where we are at right now is also designing assignments and projects where students are producing their work on VR itself. So Stephanie, would you like to talk a little bit about this assignment, and then I'll play a video. And this is an example of a student work as well.
Yeah, so these are opportunities where, so as Felicia demonstrated, we can really put students in space where they can see close perhaps something that they wouldn't be able to see otherwise. For example, like the valves inside the heart, you can see them if you have one, but some parts are harder to see than others. And in this case, we have the idea of looking at the structure of cells and also looking at structure of cell membranes. And these things, well, yes, we can look at them underneath the microscope, and there's many a diagram and many a video. They tend to be abstract concepts because they're so small. And so in this case, we have assignments where I had set the students, I said, I want you to imagine that you're doing like a museum tour, except your tour is a tour of a plant cell or a tour of an animal cell or a cell membrane. So I want you to, rotate around, walk around and share the parts of the cell or the cell membrane as if you were guiding somebody around a museum. And I got a lot of positive feedback from my students on this one because they really felt like, first of all, they were presenting, so they really had to go back and make sure that they had thought carefully about what the relevance of each of the parts were, what are the functions. And so they really enjoyed that part of being almost like they're presenting to others, like a tour. And second of all, it was a very different style of assignment in terms of being online for us, particularly with an online school or any student that's working independently at home. They spend an awful lot of screen time on the computer, and they really enjoyed the fact that they were off of the computer and felt very much immersed in this environment that just wouldn't, I mean, it is virtual reality, but it is almost a different kind of reality because they would never be standing next to a cell of this size. So they found a really unique and an innovative experience.
Yes, exactly. And even in the VR itself, what I learned is that, students, they don't get a lot of notification, distraction. So they're really focused and like putting in that time to really learn during that time. So I'll just play a small clip. Again, this is a student's work, and I'll let you have a look.
Hello, today we're going to be examining a plant cell, starting with the cell wall. The cell wall can be found outside of the plant cell, and it serves to protect the plant cell. Then we have the cell membrane, which can be found, it's the lining of the cell. Many people confuse it for the cell wall, but the cell membrane actually does not work to protect the cell. It separates the inside and the outside of the cell, and it is semi-permeable, and it regulates the transport of molecules inside and out of the cell.
So you can see they are the one actually doing all the labeling, the annotation, putting in, all the research behind when it comes to like really describing what the cell is. Stephanie, would you like to add a little bit on that as well?
Yeah, I think one of the useful things here is like how many objects are available. So when I went in to try and think creatively about how they could engage with this material, more than the traditional sense of a diagram that gets labeled on paper, like I said, abstract, you really can't visualize it or feel it. I think, we get a sense of connection by the activities that we engage our students in. And so when you go into VictoryXR and the virtual environment, you have so many different objects to choose from. So you can get really creative, and arguably the students themselves then take whatever you have and build on it because they themselves can be so creative. So really, it's, you know, sky's the limit. Think of the object that you want them to engage in. The chances are it's there for them to tour or manipulate or visualize in any way that you can think of.
Yes, I fully agree. Okay, so at this point, you know, in a K-12, in a high school environment, what do we want learners to learn is to have exposure to research skills. That's always our mind and goal. And having an awareness and start building up that critical thinking in the labs itself. We also want students to have or start to have comprehension of the conceptual knowledge, like why are they doing a lab? Why are they mixing chemical A and B together? What actually comes out of it? Understanding, like, say, if a bubbles is formed, what gas is actually behind, what reaction actually goes behind it. And with repeated space and repeated experiments, all this experience, students are actually able to show that in our classroom. We can also foster higher order thinking, specifically in the IB itself, where students have to come up with individual investigations. They are, say, if they're investigating temperature, what the effect is on plants, they have to really think about why are they using certain range of temperature? Why are they using certain methods? What are some other factors that needs to be controlled that may affect the reliability of the data? So having those environment where we can really foster all of this thinking really help us, you know, bridge the gap being in a fully online school.
And in addition to that, and I think you're bringing up here on this slide in any case, it's also that students who are new to the virtual environment as well, they're so curious, they have a lot of questions. And one of the many conversations that we had that I thought was also very useful was evaluating the virtual environment up against what it would be like in a brick and mortar. And even just the conversation around that, in particular with what I really call Tommy Lab, the one where you feed Tommy the food and Tommy does bicep curls. The students were really interested to think about, like, perhaps not just the reasons why this wouldn't be something that would actually be done, in the sense that, you know, we would have to have a controlled consenting study there for volunteer participants. But in their case, they were thinking about what are the ways in which this virtual lab differs from how it would be in brick and mortar, and less the content, more so the evaluative skills that it takes for them to think about that. We were really able to engage them in some critical and higher order thinking that way too.
Yes, yep. Yeah, so the environment helps us to, like, build that really solid foundational knowledge, so that, you know, they have a good understanding, they have a good set of skills that, you know, really can help them foster higher order thinking as we speak. All right, so just what we have learned in the class is that the students are engaged in these labs. They have a good understanding about practicals, why they are doing the practicals, and the science behind all of these experiments. We also see a lot of increased accessibility, especially for students who, say, are traveling a lot in special circumstances where a lab is not accessible. So learning of science practical skills in this case is not compromised, and also talking about how students that can benefit from repeated practice, this has been a powerful tool to overcome many, many barriers of learning, as we are seeing. And like what you have seen, students are also more comfortable exploring and communicating with peers. You know, when we say next week we are going to do this lab in VR, most of the time, that weekend itself, the students are already in the lab exploring it. And when they come into the lab on the live lessons, you know, they have all these questions, like, ready to go, and they are not at the exploring phase. They're more like, okay, I know what it's like already. I can do X, Y, and Z, but I need your help in ABC. Can you help me with that? So that communication has really amazed us. And you know, what we are seeing is also VR is not just limited to science practical skills, the comprehension of conceptual knowledge, like what Stephanie is saying. The limit is endless. Whatever you can imagine can be built in VR VR can actually do that for you. And students, they want to pick up the technology. They pick it up very fast and they want to be involved. Their work often exceeds our expectations. And it's a connection. I think they feel very connected with the environment inside, that they're curious about it. So they want to be involved. Like their learning, the onboarding process is pretty fast as well. All right, so the trajectory for the future based on what we have learned. So in VR, expanding labs and practicals can be done more on a much shorter time frame. Like you can kind of describe what you want. I can say, I want to expose my students to more advanced technology, tools, research opportunities. I can do that in my classroom too. Or I can, expand it in a much easier or accessible way. Stephanie, how does that look like from your end?
Yeah, so really going back to something I had mentioned earlier, but I think it's even more relevant in this moment, that it's not necessarily always an issue of what equipment is or isn't available in a brick and mortar situation, but in a number of brick and mortar situations, it may be that perhaps certain protocols, with or without necessarily equipment, would not be safe to conduct, and they can be conducted in virtual reality in a very safe manner. So we're thinking along the lines of things like bacterial work with antibiotics that, for example, would not be allowed now, particularly in our IB curriculum, and arguably other bacterial work. These are things that, now we have much more strict animal experimentation guidelines from the International Baccalaureate. And generally speaking, in terms of safety, when we think about chemistry, and Felicia can speak to this, certain chemicals would just not be chemicals that we are allowed to hand to students because they would pose too much of a safety risk. But there is endless opportunity for these things to be coded for in the virtual environment, and so students can engage in them and be there to witness what certain chemicals will do without a risk to their safety. And they can carry out bacterial labs and try out different antibiotics, but again, without risk to their safety. So I think that is another area where it's really exciting to be able to build those labs, not only for students or schools who might not have equipment, but also opportunity to really spark their curiosity in areas where we would otherwise not let you do that, but now we can.
Yes, because most of the time the students are actually curious, oh, what happened if I try all these antibiotics? Or like, what happens to bacterial growth, with the use of antibiotics? So they are curious about it, and like VR can actually provide this environment to conduct those studies in a very safe manner. And they can also see, oh, this is actually how bacterial growth is going to be if I incubate it differently or provide it with the wrong environment. Awesome. And we also talked about how we redefine learning by, really providing those immersive experience, even beyond the science subject itself, creating the phenomenon-based learning and really help students be the one taking ownership of their study and really doing that discovery and throughout the process of the learning as well. All right, so I believe that's it from us. Thank you for listening and being with us so far. I think we do have a couple minutes for questions.
Yes, let's take some questions. We have a couple minutes left, so I think you can raise your hand, and then Cassie will clear you through to ask a question. So we will wait for you to raise your hand and give you a couple minutes, give you a few seconds, I should say.
Or you can also just type it in the chat if that's easier.
That can work as well. Well, so I'm going to ask the first question while we are waiting for others to chime in. Talk to me a little bit about when you are working in a synchronous manner with all students. How are you sharing the facilities? Are students working at the same table together as in like pairs, or how does that work?
All right, so I can start first. So what I've done is that I've brought students into the lab, into my classrooms, and they take turns. So you can have all students say, okay, divide yourself into different benches, because there will be different bench with same set of apparatus and material set up in different bench. So if I have a large group, I can actually divide them out. But otherwise, if it's a small group, and all gather together, and maybe one of the students are doing the experiment, and then the other ones are like just making sure, or doing that discussion, like, should you use this chemical first, or no, this doesn't work, so what should I do next? So and then all this discussion are coming in, they're troubleshooting it together. They can even take turns to like run the experiment, or one person can be monitoring the results being formed, while the other one is like, coming up with a second trial. So it's pretty similar with what we are seeing in a brick and mortar lab. And one cool thing, if I may add, is also that in labs itself, we do have this function to like speed up that process. So if it's an experiment that takes many, many hours, in a live session itself, within our limited time, we can have students say, put the apparatus up and then speed it up. But they can also see how much time they have sped up. So while they're being able to finish the experiment in time, they also have that awareness about how much time this actually takes in real life.
That's great. Nene, Technicio, you're up.
Yeah, yeah, good day. Good day. It's evening over here. I just have a little question to ask. Felicia, is it possible that we can have this your lab for students in primary schools?
In primary schools?
Yeah, elementary schools. We have the package for elementary schools and secondary schools. Is it possible?
Yes, I believe it's definitely possible. Like the generation right now, they are so used to technology, and it's so natural to them that if they have a VR kit at home, they can download VXRLabs for free. Some of the labs are available for free as well, and they can go in and explore it themselves, because the apparatus, materials, everything is there, instructions are there. So they can definitely do this, and even at the primary, elementary school level.
That's
Okay,
exactly.
can I have the link to the platform?
Yes. Cassie, would you put the link to VXRLabs in the chat? And then I think let's just make sure everybody has access to ask questions in the chat. Thank you, Maynard.
Thank you very much.
Stephanie?
I can add on to answer that question a little bit more as well. So I teach 11th grade, and I also teach 6th grade. And so to answer your question directly, the 6th graders got so curious about the labs that I was doing with the 11th graders one day that they asked to wear the headset and go in the lab. And I saw it as somewhat of my own experiment, and gave them the headset just to see what they would do. And they went straight in and started manipulating all the materials. And they are 11 years old. Without any instructions from me, went in and started manipulating the objects and materials. So I can tell you from experience that they can.
That's awesome. And just a clarifying point, this can occur whether you are in a physical building. Each student can have a headset or for a lab, or it can happen if all the students are remote and in their own homes or dormitories or whatever the case might be. George, you have a question for us? George, you might have to unmute.
Yeah, good idea. Thank you. Yeah, good to see you again, Felicia, and everyone. Enjoyed seeing you at the digital conference. That was a great presentation there. And one of the things, maybe you've highlighted some of it, what are some future capabilities or things that you see down the road that will be exciting to add to your science labs for you or Stephanie to answer? What are some other capabilities or things you want to do?
So Stephanie and I discussed this a little. I think more in the near future, what we are seeing is really having experiments that were prohibited at a high school level because of limitations of apparatus, of the correct environment. Say things like if a student were to test the effects of antibiotics on bacterial growth. This is something that is not permitted at a high school level unless you have like correct ways of like incubation, knowing how to really grow bacteria at a safe space, knowing how to dispose chemicals in a safe manner. And even say dissections, it's something that we can do, but it's limited to maybe once throughout the high school life. And in a VXR lab itself, students can do it as many times as they need to help with their understanding. So that's where we kind of foresee the direction of going. And in the near future, and looking more at a bigger picture, now each of, say, chemicals in chemistry, we have data about the profile of each chemicals. What do they react with? And if we can have, all these open labs and really this big database that students can really go in one day and then conduct their own individual investigations. Like I'm curious to learn about how chemicals A react with B, and then they can do their study themselves in a lab. But that's where we're seeing it going.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for the question, Josh. Stephanie, is there anything else you would like to add on to that?
I think you shared the majority of it. I think, we just have endless opportunity for coding in objects and interactions that are not the kinds of objects or interactions that the kids would be able to see for reasons of safety and equipment. So we've already gone over those, but other ones to sort of add on to things that I've thought of so far. I've had a lot of friends asking me about the capabilities of electron microscopes, and even in a regular high school, if we're in a brick and mortar, you have the light microscopes, or you wouldn't have an electron microscope. So their ability to interact with something like that in a virtual reality world would be just an experience that they would perhaps never ever get, because it's just not a piece of equipment that many people get to interact with unless they're at a university. Also things like kids are really curious about DNA and genetic modification, and although we can do sort of basic DNA fingerprinting and things like that in a brick and mortar, and even in online labs, like the ability to actually start modifying DNA and seeing what kind of proteins can be produced and things like that, and coding in more opportunity for that in areas that are cutting edge areas of science, I think would be really exciting for them. In essence, to give them opportunities to do things that they couldn't do in a brick and mortar, because that's really the edge of what we would consider transformation, right? Giving them an experience of something that they couldn't do otherwise, that VR really gives us the opportunity for them there.
Yes, and also one more note just to add on is that, piggybacking on what Stephanie is saying, is that if students, a lot of the time they study from their textbook saying, okay, this is the results of an X-ray diffraction picture. This is who and who, Rosalind Franklin did this study, and this is the results. And from this image, we deduce that, the DNA looks like this. So from the student point of view, if they were able to do that experiment themselves, or go through that whole process themselves, we believe that it would really change the way that they understand things and how they're thinking, and really help them to think like a scientist at this stage.
And if I can add just one sort of final thing, which I think, forgive me for phrasing it as the human perspective, but something else I thought about is that science teachers, brick and mortar or otherwise, we have access to innumerable online simulators, which is great. But I really think there's something to be said for putting students in very much what I guess I'll just call the I perspective. I am doing this, I am doing that, as in I am in the environment. I am essentially I feel like I'm physically here in the lab doing it. And that feeling, that experience, it's hard. I'm not sure if I'm articulating it well, but that is a different sensation that students are engaging in, that they just don't get that same sensation by doing just a simulator on a tab of, their computer. You're putting them essentially in their mind physically there in the space, and I think that can't be underestimated. That has it engages emotionally as well with what they're doing.
And Stephanie, just to clarify, where are you physically located?
I'm physically located in Seattle right now.
Okay, in Seattle. And Felicia, where are you physically located?
I am outside of Chicago. So our science team, I think all 5 of us are at very different time zones across different continents. And yeah, even with that, we are able, and with our students being in all different time zones as well. We have all the way from Seattle to Australia. That's where our students are located at. And they are able to also, learn the skills of science and even do it together. So that's what has been amazing for us.
Wonderful.
And they change time zones, as do we. And I mean, I literally just looked over my table because my headset's right there, and it's a very portable situation. Like, it's not hard to take that. And I have several students who have traveled a lot, and they carry the headset. They're still in VR with us. Yeah,
and it's easily chargeable with the USB-C. So yeah, it's a great solution, especially for students at Dwight Global and other schools. So let me thank you for joining us today. You're doing just amazing work, and in a few years, what you are doing, everybody will be doing it. Somebody has to be the pioneer, and so thank you for that. And for all of you that joined us today, we have more of these webinars coming. If you happen to be involved with higher education, I'm doing one tomorrow morning that you can check out on our website. But we have some amazing webinars upcoming. So thanks for joining us, everybody. And we will see you on the next one. Stephanie and Felicia, much appreciated.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.